Clerk will report the bill.
The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 669, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to capital investment, the second engrossment.
Chairman Lee, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today is an important day. Today we have the opportunity to pass legislation that meaningfully invests in communities across the state. Capital investment bills are more than just the numbers that we see on the spreadsheet that we have before us, or even the bricks and mortars they are about strengthening communities, and our communities are eagerly waiting for us to take action today. Hundreds of critical infrastructure projects have gone unfunded for far too long. The last time that we had a bonding bill that went through this body and the other body and signed into law was October of 2020. There remains leaky roofs and windows in state buildings, an inadequate chemistry building at the University of Minnesota. We have riverbank stabilization issues. We have issues with kids, traveling to and from schools, and housing that needs to help support some of our most vulnerable through public housing. These projects are crucial to communities across the state. And as we have seen with some of these projects' costs from the bills that has been introduced, that inflation has impacted a lot of these projects. And so the work for the 2022 bonding bill never ceased after we adjourned session last year. And I'm really thankful for Representative Erdahl, who has been working in good faith with me to get us to this point. And so I just want to say thank you to Representative Erdahl and members. I look forward to our discussion today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There are amendments at the desk. The clerk will report the First Amendment.
Lee moves to amend House File Number 669, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A23-0041.
Chairman Lee, to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So first off of the amendment, we're canceling the 2020 appropriations for the four-site demolition, and we are reappropriated through general funds. And then we also have extensions for a Hennepin County Rail Crossing project. We extend a White Bear Lake Trail project. We have a correction for McMahon Lake Flood Mitigation project, correction for the White Bear Lake Links Trail, and correction for the extension for the St. Cloud Municipal Athletic Complex, and a technical correction for the American Farmers Association appropriations.
Discussion to the amendment. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is passed. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Erdahl moves to amend House File Number 669, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A23-0052.
Representative Erdahl, to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment adds in $90 million of the GOP local projects. Very important for our caucus, but librarians and historical societies might disagree with that because that's where the money was parked before. So I would like to move that. I also have an amendment to that amendment.
The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The amendment to the amendment.
Representative Erdahl, the clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Sorry.
Amendment to House File Number 669, second engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A7.
Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. For some reason, I'm getting all choked up today. I don't know what it is. But the amendment to the amendment just is technical language clarifying some items in the bill suggested by MMB.
Any discussion to the amendment? Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I encourage you all to support this amendment. Like Representative Erdahl mentioned, it is some technical corrections from MMB.
Any further discussion to the amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. Representative Erdahl, to your amendment as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, this is the amendment that puts in the Republican projects. The high percentage of these projects deal with PFA, Public Facilities Authority, water projects, or transportation. Thank you.
Chairman Lee, to the amendment as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I encourage a green vote for this. Like Representative Erdahl said, this is the priorities of the House Minority Caucus, and I really appreciate Representative Erdahl bringing this forward.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The amended amendment is adopted. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended.
Third reading, House File Number 669, as amended.
Discussion to the bill. The gentleman from Dakota, Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the author of the bill yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Representative Lee, thank you for bringing your bill forward today. I'm wondering if included in this bill, included in here, do we have remedial math lessons for the House DFL caucus? Is that included in this capital investment bill today?
Are you asking the gentleman to yield? Oh, you did. Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Garofalo, no.
Well, Mr. Speaker,
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Lee. Well, perhaps that could be a useful addition for future bills for the DFL. After all, the state of Minnesota does have a $17.5 billion budget surplus. And despite that we have this historic record-setting surplus, what we have for a bill before us today is a bill that will waste hundreds of millions of dollars in interest payments on debt, unneeded debt. There's no reason for the state of Minnesota to be borrowing money today when we have $17.5 billion in the state's coffers. Mr. Speaker and members, the only financially responsible position on this bill today is to vote no. Vote no for reckless spending. Vote no against wasteful interest on debt. Vote yes to make these needed capital investments in cash. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. Representative Hansen, R.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this is a strong environmental bill. Prevention is better than cleanup, and we have a lot of prevention in this bill. If you look in the bill, you'll see natural resources asset preservation. We have a lot of old buildings, a lot of old dams, a lot of old things in the environment that are improved in this bill. It has betterment of buildings. That's the Bedora Nursery, starting that up again and getting tree planting going, and the Waterville Fish Hatchery. It provides for dam renovation, flood hazard mitigation. Spring is coming. Lake Vermilion, Canisteo, St. James open pit, a lot of things we've talked about for a long time. This is a strong environmental bill. I would ask for your support for this alone. It has these improvements to our natural resources, to our public infrastructure at state parks and trails, and finally, for every dollar we spend on RIM, we bring $1.7 back to help our communities, our wildlife, and our water. I'd ask for your support.
Chairman Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is a very strong bill for transportation. A good bonding bill, a good transportation bill should cover all of the state and all modes of transportation. We have local roads and bridges. We have rail grade safety crossing support, active transportation, and arterial bus rapid transit, a transit program that has bipartisan support. So members, if you're concerned about the state of our roads, and I think we all should be, and improving our transit systems across the state. This is a good, solid bill. Please vote green.
The gentleman from Winona, Representative Pulowski.
Mr. Speaker, for the first time in a decade, the Higher Education Finance and Policy Committee has reviewed the capital investment bill for its higher education components. The best thing about this bill is the higher education asset preservation. In an era of declining enrollments, it is critical that we keep all of our infrastructure top rate, and this bill is a first step in doing that. I encourage a vote for the bill.
The Majority Leader, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be brief. I just want to first start by thanking Chair Lee and Lead Erdahl for their hard work on this bill over many years. As Chair Lee mentioned, there has not been a bonding bill since 2020, and so this bill has been the product of many years of hard work and a lot of unfinished business that needs to get done. This bill is about helping our aging infrastructure, safe drinking water, improved utility systems, improved transportation, and investments in higher education. It will mean jobs. It will mean local projects that are important to all of our communities. And for those who have talked about the surplus that we have, there are many good reasons why we pay for infrastructure projects using bonding bills. One is that we know that bonding can allow us to pay for these projects over time, so that we aren't putting all of the burden on individuals right now for projects that are going to last 30, 40, or 50 years. So it allows us to have every generation pay for these intergenerational projects. And we also have heard many priorities from both sides of the aisle for other projects that we can have come through the surplus, whether that's investments in child care and housing and long-term care. And if we are able to pay for some of these projects through a bonding bill, this will allow us to invest in those other priorities as well. So I want to thank Chair Lee and Leader Erdahl for their strong work and urge a green vote. Thank you.
Representative Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chair Lee and Leader Erdahl, for your work on this. I do agree it's our duty to maintain the infrastructure of the state. And there are a couple of very important projects on here, very near and dear to me. But I struggle with the idea of borrowing the money. So let me put this in perspective for us, for Minnesotans. Let's imagine, if you will, the hinge on your door of your house needs some work. And we need to maintain that infrastructure. And we probably should have done that last spring, but we didn't. So be it. Here we are. We need to maintain that hinge on our door. We have $1,000 in our checkbook. But to maintain that hinge is going to cost us $85. That's putting it in the perspective for a Minnesotan. That's what we're doing here. We have $1,000 in the checkbook. We're going to spend $85 on repairing that hinge. Nobody does that. It doesn't make sense. So go back to the real world. What that does is cost us $130-some million in interest. As a banker, I like that idea, but it's foolish. If you came to me and said, I'm going to spend $85, or I want an $85 loan for the hinge of my home, and you had $1,000 in your checkbook, I would say that's foolish. Why would you pay me that interest? It doesn't make any sense. And so I think we need to consider that as we move forward. And I agreed with Rep. Garofalo that this should be a cash project. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will echo some of the thoughts that were already given. And that is that right now we are sitting on a $17.5 billion surplus. That means we have $17.5 billion of cash money available to the state of Minnesota right now. And somehow that's not enough for us. We're going to borrow even more. And the total of these bills that we're passing today is almost $2 billion, which is, by a long shot, the largest bonding package in the history of the state of Minnesota. We are passing the largest bonding bills in the history of the state of Minnesota by about 30%. A 30% increase. That's massive. And I want to just share with some things with you today, because there are some really important things in these bills. Frankly, I have a road project that I've been working on for years, and we're chipping away at the funding, and we've got a pretty good portion of it, and I've got some additional funding for that in this bill today. But I want to tell you some of the other things that we are paying for. And when I talk about how we are paying for it, I want to make sure that we're clear what this means. By passing this bonding bill right now, it means that we think that every single person in the state of Minnesota should be on the hook to pay for these individual projects. Now, we all agree that there are certain projects that should happen for, right? We need good roads. We need water infrastructure. We need wastewater infrastructure. We need to maintain buildings that we've already built and keep them in good repair. In fact, let me tell you, I was so angry when I sat in our rules committee at the end of last year and was told about all the projects on the state office building that we had neglected for years. So instead of taking care of all of those projects over the years, that asset preservation that would have been appropriate, instead, we are now paying for, I forget what the number is, $500 million for the House Legislative Office building. And it's because we didn't take care of our assets. So we understand that there are some really important things that we should do. But let me tell you some of the other things that we think that every member, every citizen of the state of Minnesota should be responsible to pay for historic building facade grants in a community. We think that every citizen in the state of Minnesota should be responsible to pay over $8 million to plant trees across the state. We're saying that every single citizen in the state of Minnesota, whether they use them or not, should pay for trails. And of course, we already have funds where we pay for trails. We have an LCCMR fund, we have Lessard Sams. We have funds that are made for these things to maintain and beautify our state and have nice outdoor recreational opportunities. We have funds that pay for those things. But instead, we're going to borrow money to pay for those things today. We, for some reason, think that it is appropriate that my constituents in North Branch pay for the city of Edina for their police department. Why should my constituents pay for a police department in Edina? That is a local project that should be paid for with local tax dollars. Why should my constituents in North Branch, who do not have such a facility, pay for a wellness center in some other city? Why should my constituents pay for someone else to have a swimming pool or a sheet of ice or whatever it may be? My constituents should not be on the hook for these kinds of projects. And no one in the state of Minnesota should be on the hook for borrowing money when we have a $17.5 billion budget surplus. This is the most irresponsible bonding bill I have ever seen. At almost $2 billion, a $2 billion bonding bill, when we have a $17.5 billion surplus. This is irresponsible. Again, we should take some basic math into account, as Representative Garofalo said, because as I have a good friend who is a mathematician, but she likes to say, well, it's not magic, it's just math. The reason we should vote no on this bill today is not magic, it is just math. $17.5 billion, and we're going to borrow money. This is bonkers.
Representative West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I serve on the Capital Investment Committee, and it has been a great experience working on this bill with the chairman, who on the first day I said I appreciate his fair-mindedness, and I was not kidding. This is a fair bill. This is split evenly on partisanship. It's split evenly across the metro area and greater Minnesota. And we are constitutionally obligated as a state to take care of our state assets. You know, if we're going to build something, we have to take care of it. It's common sense. And the Minnesota Constitution directs the legislature to do so. I think this is the right bill. Not only that, there's some things that I wouldn't like to see in it, that I'd like to see removed or put something else in. But we have people in this state that not only can they not drink the water from the taps in their house, they can't even bathe in it. And if you're one of those people sitting at home, it would drive you nuts to have that not be taken care of, because it's the government's responsibility to provide safe and clean drinking water for their citizens. I think every single person in here agrees with this. So, looking at this bill, there's so much put in for wastewater around our state to ensure people do not have to live like that any longer, and to prevent that from happening in other communities around the state. So I think this is a fair bill. It's a good example of a bipartisan work that we did on the committee. It was split evenly, and you know, regardless of how you vote on it, I can see why you wouldn't, but this bill is a fair bill, and it has earned my vote.
The gentleman from Isanti, Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. We find ourselves here 2 months into the legislative session, a rapid pace. For those of you keeping score at home, Democrats have already, before we have a budget resolution that determines how much money each committee gets to suspend or give back in tax relief, Democrats have already spent $2 billion of the $19 billion surplus. And I say 19, it's actually greater than 19. If you take the money that we spent in the current biennium, we will have more than 19 billion new money to spend in the next biennium. And I say spend because here at the Capitol, unfortunately, we call tax relief spending as well. So certainly, I think Minnesotans expect in this time, when Democrat, with record Democrat inflation, 8% year over year, people paying more for their gas, more for their groceries, and Democrats are on a spending and now a borrowing spree. So $2 billion, if you're keeping score at home, $2 billion already in spending, a little more than that. This bill now, $2 billion in borrowing, so we're not just, this is over on top of the $19 billion surplus. $2 billion of borrowing and zero tax relief. Zero money for you, Minnesotans, zero. So if you're keeping score at home, Democrats' priority is to bring a bill to the House floor to borrow $2 billion when we have more than $19 billion surplus. They've already spent $2 billion of that. And we wonder why people at home think we're crazy. And I assure you, if this was your checkbook and your register that you were keeping track, you wouldn't be this foolish with your money. But it's very easy when it's not your money. And whoever said, for every Minnesotan is going to have to pay for this, I guess if you count sales tax, every Minnesotan probably pays some. But I think on income tax, we're at a point where less than half of Minnesotans now pay income tax. Or about half pay income tax. And those are the people that are paying the higher inflation, the higher gas prices, Have you been to the grocery store lately? Have you tried to refinance your mortgage lately? I can't believe how much groceries are. I'm just one single guy, and I buy for my dog too, I guess. She eats human food now. But I can't believe how much the groceries cost. Have you tried to refinance your mortgage or buy a house? Housing prices have come down a little bit, not a lot yet. But the mortgage interest rates have more than doubled in 10 months. 10 months, they've more than doubled. That affects Minnesotans' buying power, Minnesota families' buying power. But here we are in the legislature thinking somehow it makes sense when we have the not just the largest surplus in state history, we have double the largest surplus in state history. More than double the surplus that we've ever had. And 2 months into a 5-month session, we're borrowing $2 billion. Not to mention the projects, I'm not going to go through the list. But just, I do want to talk about, somebody mentioned paying for the police station in Edina. Police, fire, a building for your city hall, for your city council to meet in, those are local property tax issues. My taxpayers in my district don't need to pay for a police station in Edina. And they also, as we've already talked about, don't need to pay for the school lunches for kids in Edina. That is not a need in the state of Minnesota. A police station in Edina, Minnesota isn't a need for a taxpayer, a low-income taxpayer in my district, living in a trailer park. But especially when we have a $19 billion surplus. But the priorities of this majority are somehow, we have more than twice as much money as we've ever had, and somehow we can't find enough money to pay for that. So we have to borrow the money, incur debt and debt service and interest payments, and then put that on the shoulders of people in my district. So in the future, fire stations, police stations, city halls are not things that should be in a bonding bill. And I'm not trying to chide you right now. Just pay attention. I'm going to do you a favor. Because if you put one in, there's a whole hallway of people out here who will go out and talk to every city and every county and every township in the state and put them on contract, because they'll go to those cities and say, well, you gave it to Edina, and if you hire me, I can get you one. And your office is going to be inundated with lobbyists coming to ask for city halls, fire stations, and police stations. It's just about as logical as saying that local government aid or county program aid is tax relief. Never in the history of the state has giving LGA or CPA, county program aid or local government aid, reduced property taxes. That's spending. That's taking state tax dollars and giving them to cities and counties. We already do that. I can't remember the number to the city of Minneapolis in LGA. Is it 90 million? Somebody nod? 50 million, 90 million? I can't remember. And a city that has, I don't know, 60% of the police officers that they should have, and we still have to pay them money from the state. And they get all that commercial property tax that my district doesn't get. But my district still has to subsidize the city of Minneapolis. You see a problem yet? What we need to do as a legislature is get back to the basics. Let's provide the things that are outlined in our Constitution, which is a good education. Let's provide public safety. Let's make sure that we provide the road and bridge infrastructure. And I think lately we've seen a big need for water infrastructure, both wastewater and drinking water infrastructure. I think if you had a bill that stuck to those things, you'd probably have a unanimous vote out of here today. But unfortunately, when we stick the pork projects in, you lose a bunch of votes. And especially at a time when we've got twice the largest surplus we've ever had in state history. But Minnesotans are watching. Minnesotans very, very narrowly put Democrats in charge of this state, but they are watching at home. They're watching what you're doing. You made promises to them. You said you were going to exempt their Social Security income. Now the little buzz around the Capitol is that's not going to happen because you can't afford it. You can't afford all the spending that you want to do and still exempt Social Security income. And the proof of that is that we're borrowing $2 billion today. So Minnesotans who voted for Democrats, thinking this was going to be a good thing, listening to their promises about exempting Social Security income from state income tax, take heed. Because the evidence of borrowing $2 billion when we have twice the largest surplus we've ever had in state history should be all the evidence you need that Democrats are absolutely going to break their promise to you. And I'm going to keep a little tally sheet back here at my desk. Every time they break their promises and lie to Minnesotans, I'm going to keep track, and then I'll remind you of it throughout the session. Members, I think you know where I stand. There isn't anybody in here who should vote for this bill. Nobody. So please vote no. Let's show a little restraint, a little common sense. Let's get down to the work that's defined in our Constitution and the work that we know Minnesotans want us to do. And let's put that money back in Minnesotans' pockets where it belongs. A surplus means we're collecting more money than we need to operate state government. That money belongs to Minnesotans. And I'm reminded by, I don't know whose quote it was, that government can only spend money that it first has taken from one of its citizens. Think about that while you're spending their money instead of taking the surplus that you have and giving it back to them like you promised you were going to do. But luckily, taxpayers have a few of us here that are going to stand up every day on the House floor and remind them of the promises you made and the fact that you're not living up to them. I hope you look forward to those little speeches too. Thanks, members. Please vote no.
Before I go to Lead Erdahl and Chair Lee, is there anyone else who would wish to speak on the bill? Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate a lot of the comments that have been made today, and I'm going to make a few of my own. This last week in church, actually, I was visiting with a young lady who was lamenting the deduction that she had found after the end of the year. Her total tax paid as a hard-working landscaper. And she just looked at me and said, Representative Heinzman, what is happening? How is this possible? Why do I even work? And of course, you know, I'm trying to encourage this young lady. You know, we understand, I hope, today, the kind of example that we are setting in the state of Minnesota as legislators when we have the money, and instead we say, nope, we're going to borrow $2 billion today. What kind of example are we setting to the young landscapers and the young highway workers and others that are looking down the road saying, what am I doing? That is not the example that I want to set today. And don't kid yourselves, members. The state of Minnesota is watching. The young kids, the hardworking folks around the state, they want to see us responsibly handle a $19 billion surplus. And rather than spend every penny of it and then borrow an additional $2 billion, we have an alternative. I would advocate for that today. Let's set an example for Minnesota's hardworking taxpayers. And as Representative Dowd was just mentioning moments ago, on the other end of the spectrum, those that are counting on us to do the right thing and exempt their Social Security benefits from state income tax, that's not a priority today. Today, the priority is borrowing $2 billion. No, they're not. I'm just flabbergasted that that's the priority today, is borrowing before taking the responsible approach and first taking care of our seniors, taking care of our taxpayers, those that were overtaxed to the tune of $19 billion. That should be our first priority here on the Minnesota floor today. It should have been months ago, but it's not. That's disappointing. I hope we choose to take a breath and give this process the opportunity to make or take a different course. I have a feeling that's not going to happen, but I hope that it doesn't move forward as it looks like it might today.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Pryor. Like I said, the representative from Dakota, Representative Ryer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You're not the first person to do that. I'm really proud to stand and speak about this bill. We've been working on this bill for 2 years since I joined the House. 14 days on buses with Lead Erdahl, Chair Lee, a bipartisan group working on the seeing all around the state the needs, seeing all around the state the hope in people's faces when they're showing us the projects, their crumbling water infrastructure, their desire to invest in their natural resources, their desire to invest in their schools, rebuild buildings, make them places that they can be proud of in their communities and that where they can continue to live and flourish. That's what this bill is. It's taking care of the resources that we have with the HEAPR that was mentioned, with asset preservation in corrections for the Department of Natural Resources, for our veterans who have done so much for us, and we are reinvesting in them. We're investing in housing. Our public housing stock is, to put it nicely, inadequate in many ways, underinvested. We toured public housing, saw exposed and corroding pipes, damage in the walls, places where people are living out their days to the best of their ability to have a dignified, safe, and comfortable life. We can help with that. In the past years, we have given $62 million over a decade. This year, we can give $72 million and chip away at a $350 million plus deficit in these basic features of housing for people that we have promised to look out for and support. We're also funding Greater Minnesota housing infrastructure, knowing that the lack of housing is a statewide issue, making it easier for smaller communities to attract workforce housing, senior housing, they're putting the infrastructure in place so that they're building ready. And we are funding projects that benefit the environment. We're planting trees and reforesting. We are modernizing the Badura State Forest Nursery. In 2019, this little nursery sold 2.89 million tree and shrub seedlings. And they've got a seed library for each of our forests. They do all of this with paper and pencil like they did when they were established in 1931. It's time to invest in them and modernize this facility. There's so many things in here that benefit our people, that are an investment in our people, not community by community pulling us apart, but the state of Minnesota looking out for each other, looking out for all of our communities from Minneapolis to Moorhead to Esco, all across the state. We have a responsibility to invest, and that's why I'm proud to support this bill. In closing, I just want to thank a few people. I want to thank our DFL researcher, Jennifer Nelson, our GOP researcher, Chelsea Axelson, nonpartisan staff, Chelsea Griffin and Andrew Lee, our CLA, Abdulaziz Mohammed, of course, our committee administrator, Jenny Nash, and then very much Chair Lee for your leadership and Representative Erdahl for your leadership. Thank you. Please vote green.
Further discussion to the bill as amended. The lady from Wabasha, Goodhue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand here today, as we all know, and this is in the news over and over, we have this $17.5 billion surplus. I think if there's one place that government should be spending our money, it truly is on infrastructure. It is truly on the basic needs that's going to benefit everyone in roads and keeping up our buildings, because that is financial responsibility. We need to be fiscally responsible with our dollars. However, right now, today, with this $17.5 billion surplus, that's not enough, Minnesota. Our surplus is not enough. And that is just so disappointing to sit in this body and to see that we are going to borrow with bonding on projects that Minnesota absolutely needs. I think it's fair to say, watch what people do, not what they say. And I hear over and over, we are supporting environmental causes, so we should applaud that. We are supporting housing, so we should applaud that. We are supporting the veterans, so we should applaud that. And yet, we can do every one of those things and not borrow a dollar, not borrow a dime. The other day in my committee meeting, I referenced our government as a business, which then some of the Democrats said later, we are not a business. I know we are the government, and yet the taxpayers expect us to run this like a business. A business and a household at the end of the day has to balance their spreadsheet. At the end of the day, a household and a business does not usually say, we're just going to keep on borrowing, we're just going to keep on going in debt, and that it doesn't matter. It does matter. The little secret, Minnesota, is even with a $17.5 billion surplus, it's not enough for the Democrats. Why? It's not enough money because if they pay cash, the dirty little secret is they're not going to have the extra money to spend on all of this other huge list of things that they are ramming through this legislative session. That's the secret, Minnesota. $17.5 billion surplus is not enough money for the Democrats who are spending out of control. I support infrastructure. I support our communities. And yet, I support fiscal responsibility, and I bet if you poll, 90% of our Minnesotans would also say the same thing, that they would support paying cash on this bill and voting no to this bonding bill. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, members, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss why this isn't quite the right policy for the state of Minnesota. With a near $20 billion budget surplus, taxpayers deserve their money back. Whether that's in a list of income tax cuts or whether that is fully eliminating the tax on Social Security income, that should be the priority of this chamber because so many of you campaigned on it. Because members on both sides of the aisle said that was the top priority that they wanted to work on when they got elected. But instead, we're going about spending, spending, spending. And I just wanted to create just a little bit of a picture for us here in Minnesota. We've seen some pretty historic investments in the state in recent years. Minnesota is benefiting from some work that was done on the federal level. If you didn't know already, Minnesota is going to be the benefit of $7.4 billion in infrastructure money coming here over the next 5 years. And our good work together has allowed a lot of that money to be implemented in our state. And we should be focusing upon things like that. But here, this body has already passed nearly $2 billion worth of spending in total through this chamber. And in addition to that, we've chased the most extreme agenda that I've ever seen in this body, in this state. The most extreme abortion law in the world. The most extreme energy policy in the country. And last week, the most extreme gun control was introduced. And somehow we find ourselves today in this moment where we somehow want to pass the largest bonding bill in state history with the largest budget surplus in state history. This isn't the right policy for our state. I happen to represent a great community in central Minnesota that happens to have many fantastic Minnesota workers that I love supporting each and every day. And I had the chance to talk with one of them this morning, and he had called me originally to tell me how much he supported a bill like this. And I happened to explain to him just the facts that we have a near $20 billion budget surplus, and yet this body is suggesting that we should be borrowing from future generations here in Minnesota, instead of investing and using the money that has already made its way to state coffers and putting that to work in infrastructure. And did my constituent ever think that was a silly idea? Because it truly is. We can put Minnesotans to work by investing using the money that's already in our state coffers, in the budget surplus. And unfortunately, that's not the decision before us. Instead, this body is so excited to chase headlines around the biggest, the most extreme, and policies that are going to set our state back in the future. I encourage a no vote on this bill.
The gentleman from Itasca, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to speak to this bill today because obviously it's been being worked on a while and there's a lot of different opinions in the room today. I will start and say I wish the bill was cash. I think everyone on our side wishes the bill was paid for with cash today because we have that opportunity. But I did want to point out that there are some good things in this bill, and I do want to appreciate the work that was done bipartisanly on that. Because I think we heard a lot of discussion here today about how politics has been very polarizing, but I think the work that was done on this bill did come together and show a little bit of unity, and that's what Minnesotans want. So if we could use that message and couple and start moving that forward toward the rest of session, I think that would be good. I think one of the really good things in this bill is talking about all the money that's in there for our roads and bridges, especially for townships and smaller local governments. As someone that represents those communities, it's very, very important that those dollars are there to leverage so that those communities can take care of the roads, take care of our infrastructure. That is important. I also want to talk about the good work that's in there for Minnesota State. You know, those colleges that are in outstate Minnesota are incredibly important to our greater Minnesota local communities. That's where we go to college, that's where we get our degrees, and that's where we stay working and living in northern Minnesota and greater Minnesota. It's incredibly important. So moving forward on this bill today, and I don't want to say too much because I know we're all trying to get through this and there's still others to speak, but there are good things in this bill and I do appreciate it and I hope it can move forward and we can continue this bipartisan work that listens to both sides, that takes amendments like we did today. Thank you.
The gentleman from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the author of the bill, Chair of Committee, answer a question?
He will yield. The gentleman from Olmsted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have no idea what the interest rates will be when these bonds are sold. With today's current interest rate, what would the annual payments be on this bill?
Chair Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representatives. The cost over base for this will be, for this proposal will be $436 million, understanding that of the funding one-time appropriations, we have $393 million in there for the next bill that we'll be taking up.
The gentleman from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The acoustics were a little bit fuzzy. What was the annual, if everything was sold with today's interest rate, what would the annual total payments be?
Are you asking Chairman Lee to yield?
That I am. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
He will yield. Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative. So the debt service for the borrowing of this $1.5 billion bills is $39.8 million for fiscal year 24-25.
Representative Quam.
Thank you. I guess when I think of payment, I think of interest and principal, and I think you just quoted me back what the guesstimate on the interest was. When I'm looking at the budget going forward, what are the total payments annually? And I can do that multiply times two in my head if he would yield.
The gentleman will yield. Representative Lee. Representative Quam, were you finished with a question? Chairman Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so, Representative Quam, maybe I'm not understanding your questions. Like I said, the cost for the debt service for this $1.5 billion proposal is $39.9 million.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess I'll find out offline, sit down and we can have a chat. When I do a loan or I do a charge on a card, I look at what are the payments across the period of time to pay it back, how will that affect my budget, and I just thought it'd be good for the chamber to actually know the annual, or I guess biannual, impact, cash flow on the budget for a bill that they're going to vote on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion to the bill. Lead Erdahl.
What the heck? It's a sign. Somebody doesn't want me to talk. Mr. Speaker and members, first I would like to join Representative Ryer in thanking those that she thanked. I want to particularly highlight Chair Lee for his work on this and for his fairness. I'd like to particularly thank two staff people, and that's the DFL-CA, Jenny Nash, and also my Republican researcher, Chelsea Axelson. Thank you very much. One item I'd just like to, I keep hearing $2 billion that we're borrowing here. And, I think it's 1.5. So in my world, $500 million is still a big chunk of change. And so it's 1.5, not 2. The other money is cash that we may be considering after this bill. Now, certainly, if we ran the place over here, this side of the aisle, we'd do some things differently. You know, we likely would do an all-cash bill. But we don't run the place. And so faced with the realities that we have, we're trying to support the best possible bill we can. And I think we've come a long way toward doing that. So why do we bond? To address the needs of Minnesota's infrastructure. If we fail to do so, what is the impact? The needs will remain. Someone is going to have to pay for them. If the state of Minnesota is not helping through bonding and low interest rates, local property taxes are going to go up to pay for them. Somebody is going to pay for the needs of the property of the state of Minnesota and that the public owns. Now, we live in unique times. We didn't do a bill the last biennium. We have a large surplus, but we still have billions of dollars in requests more than we will be spending. There's a great need, and the need remains and will still be there after this bill is done. Bonding returns money back to the people. More than a lot of the things that can be done here in this legislative session. Again, if we ran the place, we probably would do it differently. But this is one way that money does go back to the people through taking care of the infrastructure needs and keeping down property taxes. Minnesotans want clean water. They want a good transportation system for personal travel and for a vibrant economy. Now, we've been working on this for almost 2 years. We need to get it done. Now, some may think that I've been obsessed with getting this done. Actually, my wife thinks that. But if obsession means being totally committed to addressing the infrastructure needs of Minnesota, I'm guilty as charged. If it means doing our utmost for clean water and good roads, I'm guilty. And I will vote green on this bill. Thank you.
Chairman Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members, for the discussion on the proposal before us today. Just want to echo Representative Erdahl and Representative Ryer in thanking all of our staff. Mr. Andrew Lee with House Fiscal, Chelsea Griffin with House Research, Chelsea Axelson with GOP Research, Jen Nelson with DFL Research, Abdul Aziz, my new committee legislative assistant, Ms. Jenny Nash, our committee administrator, who is in charge of putting together our committee hearings and also the tours that we have gone on for the last few biennium and that we will continue to do so this fall. I also want to thank two of my former legislative assistants who is no longer here with us today. Joel Chesky, who was with me in 2021, Blake Wilcox, who was with me in 2022. Also want to thank Representative Ryer, Vice Chair, for this session, and also former State Representative and Chair Mary Murphy, who has shown me the rope and mentored me and putting together a bonding bill that really is reflective of the entire state of Minnesota and really having a process, whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat, that we need to see and hear from all Minnesotans so that we can have a product that's reflective of the entire state. Members, even if you can't draw a line from this bill directly to your home, we're investing in projects, jobs, resources, and institutions that have the ability to touch the life of every single resident of our state. And I just wanted to quickly share a story that I recall in the last tour that we have in the fall of 2021. This was over at Pine Tech Community College and Representative Nathan Nelson's district, where as we were going through the school visit, I took a side step and saw one of the students that was working on a minivan. And I asked the student, why do you come here? What's the purpose here for you? And he responded that, right now he's going through the mechanic program because in his region, he see a need for people to service cars for people with disability. And in my, mind, I never would have thought that, this is something that's so critical for all of us, but I think that just shows you the impact that for all of us, whether that's, investing in our higher education institutions or some of the issues that were brought forth today, what we do here does matter for the entire state of Minnesota. And so just a reminder for all of you that the work that we have in front of us today is a result of the work that we have through the 2021 session, 2022 session, and the bonding towards traveling over 2,300 miles with the speaker up there, with Representative Erdahl and everyone else. And so Representative Erdahl, I do want to say thank you for your partnership and collaboration in this, and for you always reminding me about being a statesperson, and we should not think about whether this is for a Republican district or a Democratic district. Members, we have a good product in front of us today. I urge your green vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. But before we vote, members, this takes a supermajority of 81 votes, and we do have 2 remote votes. The clerk will take the roll on the bill as amended. The clerk will call the remote votes.
Keeler.
Keeler votes aye.
Keeler votes aye. Censor Murrah.
Go ahead.
Censor Murrah, aye.
Censor Murrah votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 91 ayes and 43 nays, the bill as amended is passed and its title agreed to.